So you know the four, right? Let's see, carbohydrates, you have lipids, you have monomers, or wait, you have carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So there's your four. Now, there's that big red remember. In biology, function is related to structure. So if the structure is such a way, it's going to behave in such a way. Oh, whoa, okay.
All right.
So let's start with nucleic acids. Nucleic acids. I'm going to give you probably not quite everything you would get if you were an AP, but pretty close. Now, store biological info in the sequence of their nucleotides. So the smallest part of a nucleic acid is its nucleotide. That's the monomer, right? We've talked about those, right? I haven't taken notes in a while, so I can't remember. Pretty sure we did. Okay, so the monomer is one unit, and so the simplest, smallest unit of a nucleic acid is its nucleotide. Now, remember, it stores biological info, and it's all bound up in the sequence of the order of the nucleotides. For example, human beings, if you look at each other's DNA, compare them to mine, and we compare them to each other's, our DNA is like 99 point something exact in order. So the A, T, C's, and G's, they're there. Okay? That's what they're talking about. It's always in a sequence. So the sequence determines like the organism, or the sequence determines what protein will be made. Okay, so here's a picture of a nucleotide. Okay, remember that is a monomer. Mono meaning one, mer meaning unit, so one unit. And so this is the standard, the very standard nucleotide. You're going to have a nitrogen base here, a phosphate group here, and always a 5-carbon sugar here. And it can be either deoxyribose or ribose. Now, let's just say this one, for what we have a picture of here, this is going to be ribose. So this is a nucleotide of a nucleic acid. This is like, how would I type? I would probably label this RNA. Because like when we talk about DNA and RNA, they're nucleic acids. Anytime you see that half of a coil, that's always going to be RNA. RNA is responsible for making protein. You notice that's not written up there. So if I were you, I would write that down. It's responsible for making protein. It's the instructions. If you think of your DNA as a cookbook, this would be the recipe that you would find in one of that cookbook somewhere. Okay, so that's the polymer. Now if you look at the next one, again, look, it's not very much different. They're always the same structure, but the sugar might be different. Now, this is a double helix. This is just a single helix. This is a double helix. This is your DNA. This is what everybody's DNA looks like. It gets coiled up. I think there's 144 million turns in every DNA molecule. It's quite twisted up. And I've heard that DNA, if you let it unwind, it's either going to be 2 inches or it's going to be 6 feet. You hear different things in different sources. But in this case, this is DNA, deoxyribo. Up here was RNA, which is your ribose. So the sugar here is different than here, but you can tell about everything is the same. Everything is the same. Okay. That's it for nucleic acids. Here we go for proteins. Again, when you hear proteins, you probably think muscle. That's just the culture we live in. I think if you had me in biology, I showed you a picture of this really muscular guy. He was like a fake, and it was just gross. So you might remember that when we talk about proteins. Okay, so proteins. There's that big kiss there. They have different structures, different functions. Proteins have different structures, different functions. These are the workhorses. The proteins are the workhorses of the body. There are thousands and thousands of different ones in our body. Some of them make the structure like your your hand, your hair, your fingernails, your skin, your muscle. There are some that are chemical messengers, like hormones. So they tell you when to grow, when to stop growing. They tell you when to go into puberty, when to stop puberty, all that good stuff. The chemical, or if you get scared to death. They're the thing that makes that heart rate go way up, makes you alert, makes you ready to run like crazy or fight like an animal. Adrenaline. That's a protein. Because so when you think protein, just don't think muscle. There's a lot of different things. Now, the smallest part of a protein, its monomer, is an amino acid. There's 20 of them. 9 essential that we got to eat somewhere else. 11 that we can make with our own bodies. And what you need to know, remember, the arrangement here is key. Just like in nucleic acids, the arrangement's key. If it's in a certain, the amino acids are arranged in a certain way, you're going to get a certain polypeptide, which is just a fancy way of saying this. Whenever you see polypeptide, don't let it blow your mind and say, oh, I don't know. Yeah, you do. Polypeptide. This is called a peptide. Peptide, peptide. And this is the bond. You put them all together, you get a polypeptide. Okay. You get a different arrangement, you get a different polypeptide, or you get a different protein. Again, what they do is they help us build our structure, they help us repair and grow. Chemical messengers. I don't know how many more you can write down as fast as you can. Okay. Proteins. Okay, carbohydrates. Here we go. Our main energy source. This is the main energy source for living things on this planet. For the majority of living things, carbohydrates it. Trees, you might not think, but yeah, trees, they need carbohydrates, so the sun shines on them. They use the water and they pull the carbon out of the air, go through photosynthesis, and they make carbohydrates. Now, right now, trees are growing acorns, so they're storing some of those carbohydrates away. Storing some of them away. But this is the main one. Probably 60 to 70% of everything we eat, guys, is carbs. But remember, the main energy source for living things is carbs. Now, that's not the most energetic of the molecules, but this is the one that we use for energy. And I'll tell you why. Because it is easy. Our bodies think it's easy to get the energy out of the molecule of a carbohydrate. It doesn't take much. You guys remember the story? If you had me in class and when I was a freshman, I said, hey, cross-country coach. When I was in cross-country, the coach says, hey, give everybody a chocolate bar. He says 20 minutes before we run. He says, I want you to eat it. So 20 minutes before the run, man, we eat it. We're thinking, wow, this is going to be cool. He's got some like secret up. We get up on the line and we're like ready to go. We are just like dying to get after it. And 5 minutes in, we burn through all the energy in that Hershey bar. What happens after a sugar rush? Crash. We didn't do very well. He never did that again. Nowadays, we know we carb up. We have a pasta party or something like 2 days before a meet or a match or a ball game, and then it takes that long for the body to break that down. You get the energy. Okay, so remember, order of the monomers determines the function and the properties. And so the really fancy name for a monomer is a monosaccharide. Now, again, big words. Mono means what? One. Mono means one. Anybody know what saccharide means? I would be really impressed if somebody could tell me what it was. It means this. It's a fancy word for sugar. Again, that's one of those that a scientist or a professor makes up to torture high school students and high school biology teachers, right? So monosaccharides, this is the mono. And then when you put your monomers together, you get a carbohydrate, that's the polymer. So here's two examples. This is glucose. That is a monosaccharide. You don't see anything there but one sugar. One sugar. Okay. Look at it by sight. You got to remember what it looks like. Also, it's C6H12. 12O6. That's the chemical formula. Again, put it to memory. Put it to memory. And if you look, over here is another monosaccharide, another monomer of carbohydrates. That's fructose. So that's like fruit sugar. And you notice whenever you see the OSE at the end, you know you're looking at a sugar. Same thing here with glucose. OSE at the end. That's a sugar. Now, what was for lunch today? So whatever you had for lunch right now, your body's trying to turn it into this. Because glucose is the actual fuel that our muscles run off of. That's why I always told people when I coach cross country, right, the chocolate milk. That's because you can get this. Now, look what happens when you put all these together. See this bond right here? This is called a glycosidic bond. Glycosidic bond. So here's one, here's one, here's one. And before you let that bake your noodle, a glycosidic is a bond, is just a covalent bond. Glycosidic is just a covalent bond that bonds glucose and other sugars together. Okay, so don't let that bake your noodle. You see that big word glyco? Glyco means sugar, okay? And it's just a covalent bond. Are covalent bonds easy for our body to break? What do you think? Yeah or nay? Yeah, it is. Remember I told you up here, carbs are easy. That's why that's why it's our main energy source. Okay. Starch is a good example of a carbohydrate. Disaccharide. Table sugar is a disaccharide. So if you like table sugar, which I do on Rice Krispies, I don't know if you guys do, but it's energy storage. Okay, last thing, lipids. Lipids contain more energy than carbs, but they're built for us. A couple reasons that I think are good for you. One, they're energy storage. And I always tell it this way: when a bear hibernates, when it goes in, it's been eating from the time it woke up the spring before. It's been eating like crazy, trying to build up its layer of fat, that when it goes back in, it can lay there and wake up every once in a while. It doesn't have to go out and eat. It can just lay there. And so this is the energy. And so there's much more energy in a lipid than there are in carbs. But remember, carbs, to get the energy, it's easy. This, it's a little more difficult. People like to go on diets to lose weight, and they don't realize that when they do that, it's easy. All you got to do is burn more calories than you take in, and then your fat cells drain. But when you get off your diet, you go right back. You just have to change your lifestyle. There's only one way to do it. But lipids, they're the main energy storage system. Here's another one. They make up the cell membrane. And when we get into the cells a little more, you'll see that. They make up the cell membrane. Now, no true monomer. No true monomer. And so there's no true monomer. I don't know. Maybe you could say there is a polymer. I don't know. I'm going to show you a couple molecules. Okay, questions so far? I think we're just about done. We're about finished. Okay, have you ever heard of saturated, unsaturated fats? Yeah. Well, you have unsaturated lipids, fats, because, right, lipids are fats, waxes, or oils. So like if you burn a candle, that's a lipid, that's considered a lipid. Like vegetable oil, that's one. Remember, I got this up here, you can shave. It's water. Remember, water molecules, polar. Lipids are not polar. They don't have a positive or negative, so they can never mix with water. Now, when you see unsaturated, and I'll just put fat and then saturated fat, this is what the typical molecules look like. Saturated fats are said to be bad for us. Again, I don't have it up there. I can't write everything. You guys got to do some of it. If I were you, I'd be writing some of this stuff. Saturated fat versus unsaturated fat. This is the better of the two, according to all the studies. How are they different? Say it.
Less hydrogen.
Less hydrogen. Look what effect that has. This makes this tail kinky. AP Bio circles, we called that the kinky tail. But if you would put the hydrogens back here, it would straighten up. And so this makes a liquid at room temperature. Liquid at room temp. So like olive oil, canola oil, vegetable oil, they're all liquid at room temp. Okay? And then over here, these would be a solid at room temp. Again, these are considered a little more unhealthy for us. I don't know. Think about this. Have you ever cooked with this? Lard? Yeah, they say it's really bad for you, but tell that to my grandma who lived to be 94. She ate that. She used that to cook with everything, and she's fine. Now look, here's why it's a solid. You see how this straight, this carbon backbone here is straight? Think if you pile a bunch of them on each other like this, they're going to form a solid. This is why they are solid. Right? You add a little heat and they will melt, but these guys here, they got that kinky tail, so they can't stack on top of each other and make a solid. You know, think about it. If you stack paper on it, you get a ream of paper. Pretty solid. But if you go ahead and you crunch up the paper and try to stack it, you can't do it. It takes up more space. And that's this one here. Okay? And what you got to remember is that anywhere you see a bond, there's energy. So this molecule actually has another one of these here and here. It's a huge molecule, but you only see one of the tails of it. Okay? And then, remember I told you it makes up our cell wall? So if you look right up this picture, you can see it. This is a phospholipid. So it's like a space alien, but it's a phospholipid. This is the head. This is considered the tail. And look how they're arranged in your cell wall. So our cell wall has one on the outside, one on the inside. And these love water. These are polar. They love water. I'm going to draw a big heart, big hearty. They love water. And when water gets around, they will attract the water. But the tails are non-polar. They don't like it. Tails are non-polar. So remember, the lipid part of it, it doesn't have a charge, so the water won't go to there. Here's a cool thing. Some water molecules are small enough that they can be attracted, and then they might squeak through. But they're not going to stay here simply because these are lipid tails, and the water will be forced out. We can't get our water that way because we would eventually dehydrate, but there are bigger proteins that go across the membrane and are made just for water. We'll get into those when we get into the cells. But know this, polar head, non-polar tail, loves water, hates water. And because of its function, the way it's built, that determines its function. The way it's built determines its function. Okay. Any questions? All right.